Who will be representing? Who will be representing the county?
That's me, Dan Wilhelm.
Okay, Dan. All right. So I'm going to reconvene. We were in a recess, and I'm going to ask Mr. Grill and his party if you'd like to make a, so we're hearing appeal 210415.0 AP 1675 Capital One Drive. So, Mr. Grill, I'll turn it over to you for a 2-minute or less opening statement.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My name is Ray Grill. I'm a fire protection engineer. Is it possible to share my screen so I can put an image up?
Carla, can that happen?
Yeah, I think. Let me see if you can see my screen.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So I think you should be able to view my screen. Great.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. So thank you very much. And I just want to say that we have been working diligently with the county to try not to go to the Board of Appeals on this issue. We first started talking to the county last fall about this, so we've had a number of iterations. But the crux of this request is focused on this little red area in what we call Block B, which is a large office building. Basically a second headquarters building. This is the building that's open and operating right now. This is the new headquarters building. This is the old headquarters building. This is Block A, and we're talking about the decking material for this small deck, which is approximately 1,700 square feet at a second floor. Here's a rendering of the location. This is the deck, and at issue here is the materials basically that we're proposing we're proposing an epay decking material for this wood deck, which would be supported by FRT lumber joists. Here's an image of the detail. It's supported by a 2-hour fire-rated concrete slab. So this is a 2-hour fire-rated concrete slab. When this is an outdoor space, totally open to the sky. The decking material would be supported on FRT joists, and the entire area within the void space will be filled with a non-combustible material, a non-combustible fill, which is a foam glass product, which is basically very light rock made from glass, recycled glass. The only thing that makes this non-compliant, and we thought there was a path for compliance, because this epay material, this wood, meets a flame spread of Class B for interior finish. We could literally line the atriums in this building with this material, and it'd be strictly code compliant. We could use this epay wood as flooring material throughout the entire building, and it would be strictly code compliant. What makes this unique is that we're not providing an additional layer of sheathing between the FRT lumber and the epay. If we put a FRT plywood below the epay, then it would be strictly code compliant, and we could have the epay on top of it. But that won't allow the drainage, which we need in an exterior environment. So there is no potential for fire spread given what we're proposing. And we just feel that there is no safety or fire hazard presented here. I've got additional information that we can talk about later, but here is a section in the building code under section 805, which is interior materials, and it talks about subfloor construction and allowances of combustibles in type 1 or 2 construction, and it allows basically wood sleepers of combustible materials when the space is solidly filled with non-combustible materials or fire blocks. So we are filling a space with non-combustible material and feel that this is certainly meeting the intent, if not the letter of the code.
Okay.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Dan Wilhelm?
Hi, this is Dan Wilhelm, Deputy Building Official, Fairfax County. So as Ray described, they submitted a code modification to allow the Ipe wood has a structural wood decking. And it was the view of our committee, which included, myself, building plan reviewers, and as well as the fire marshal's office. Their proposal really didn't meet the intent in providing an equivalent level of protection based on the code. And it's largely to do with the structural capacity or the structural function of the decking itself. The code, this is a non-combustible building, but there are some allowances to allow fire retardant treated wood in limited instances. For example, this platform of a limited size and height. And it was the view of the committee that, as Ray pointed out also, that because it's structural is really the defining difference here. They could, if they had a structural deck, you use plywood, but you could use 2x members directly underneath the Ipe tube, and just put the Ipe on top of those members, and you would still have the gaps between the boards, and that would be permissible because the fire retardant treated wood would be acting as the structural component. The caveat here is that they're asking not only to use this as a finish flooring material, but also as the structural component of the floor or the platform. And their method or proposal to compensate for that was to fill the voids, as Ray mentioned, with a non-combustible material, which would limit the propagation of a fire underneath. And he referenced a section for concealed spaces for sleepers, which are typically continuously supported. They don't really act as a structural capacity. They would just, they contribute to the fill load of the building. So that's a different concept. So it's just the view of the committee that because the combination of function that the decking would serve as structural and a finished material, the committee felt that it did not meet the intent of the code because it needed to serve in a structural capacity.
Oh, sorry. Okay, Mr. Grill, go ahead and
Okay, thank
go into
you,
more
Mr. Chairman.
detail at your convenience.
Okay, well, I would like to just address one thing. First off, when the structural aspect of this, yeah, I understand what Mr. Long, Dan's saying, but I just want to reinforce the fact that the only thing structurally these Ipe boards are doing are supporting the occupants that are on there. It has nothing to do with the structure of the building itself. We have a 2-hour structural slab that's supporting this whole element. And should there be any failure of one of these Ipe boards, which would be totally unlikely, it's not like someone's going to fall anywhere because the solid fill is not compressible either. So I would like to introduce Jared Krieger, who is the architect responsible for this project, to point out some issues as well, if that's acceptable.
Go ahead. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and board members. Good afternoon now, as opposed to good morning. I'm Jared Krieger. I'm with Gensler, and I'm the signing principal on the project, and have been working on it since the inception. So I appreciate the time today and considering our appeal. I just want to start with a little bit of just the history of this matter. And I always appreciate Mr. Wilhelm and their willingness to just talk to us when comments come up so that we can really get to the intent of what it is and try to work through it. So with that, I think the comment has evolved over time as we've learn more about the county's perspective. So, Ray can get into some of the really specifics of the code and flame spread and those things, but like at a high level, we have an approved permit for the project. It's currently under construction, as I'm sure anyone who goes by that part of the Beltway and Capital One's campus see there's a lot of activity there. So we actually have one of our topping out ceremonies tomorrow, which is pretty exciting. In January, we had to go back for a permit refile, just updating our permit, which I'm sure you all know is very common on projects of this size. Things evolve over time, over the 5 years that we've been working on this, and wanted to make sure our permit was up to date. One of which was the canopy that Ray pointed out. Ray, if you can go back to the rendering. Originally, this was a canopy outside the building, but the design evolved, and it's now become a potential occupied terrace. And just a slight correction, it's 1,300 square feet for the occupancy of this, and it's constructed of steel and metal decking, just like Ray said, consistent with Type 1A, 1B construction. That's the structural part of this terrace and this canopy. It's consistent with 1A, 1B for the superstructure of a building like this. And the only thing on top is the waterproofing to allow drainage, and the sleepers, the sub framing, just like any deck has been made for many years, and the finished surface. So when we submitted this initially, we thought we were strictly code compliant. We've done this exact detail for many years around the country without issue. So we were a little bit surprised that there was even an issue to begin with in the first place. When it was noted as a comment, like I said, Mr. Wilhelm and his team, they're always willing to talk about it and share constructive feedback. So it was brought to our attention that the main concern was the space below the epay, below the decking, and how a fire could potentially propagate below the joist space. So as Ray pointed out in Section 805, which is related to combustible materials in interior materials in Type 1A construction, we then reacted by, okay, we'll understand, we'll fill the void space if that improves it from the county perspective, which is what we did. We filled it with the non-combustible material, and we believe that that is now above what code requires for this situation. And then that resolution got rejected. So we went back to the conversation, and it sounds like now the concern is about the epay material itself used as decking. And I'm not an expert when it comes to wood material, but I've done enough of this to know that there is no structural concern with this for spanning the normal 16 inches on center that a decking spans. This is one of the hardest woods on the face of the earth. I've personally built decks out of this at my house and my friend's house, and it is sometimes called ironwood. It is a pain in the butt to work with because it is so strong and so dense. So that is why this has been chosen as an acceptable material in a commercial application, because there is no doubt that a material like this will be able to span with no structural concerns in this case. So again, like Ray said, to put this in perspective, we could do this for the entire interior of this building, over 1 million square feet, and it wouldn't be an issue. So we're trying to react to the comments that were given. I don't think we're asking for an exception to the code. We don't think there is any life safety risk here. We're confident there isn't, and my colleague Ray can get into some of the more technical specifics of that. Thank you.
Any other input at this point, Mr. Grill?
Well, the only other thing I'd like to point out is epay has been tested in some assemblies as a roof covering as well, and it has shown to pass the Class A roof covering flame spread tests. So it is not easily ignited. It is as Jared has mentioned, is very dense wood, and also there also is no exposure to this deck. You can see on the campus here, this is the Performing Arts Center on Block C. This is all Type 1 construction. All of these facilities are fully sprinkler protected. There's no exterior exposure to that deck as well. So, we'd appreciate consideration of our request. Thank you.
Okay. Board members, George, do you have any questions?
Yeah, anybody from the Capital One side. What I heard was that the glass foam was non-compressible, meaning if the board burned, nothing would fall through anyways. Did I hear that correctly?
That's correct. That is correct.
Here, Ray, I believe they also use this fill material to do, highways and filling
Yes.
interstates, and it is a deemed an equivalent both structurally and fire protection wise as just using gravel. It just so happens to be lighter, so you don't have to add additional steel below it.
Yeah, that's correct. And it's also been utilized in the Block C project to build up some of the landscaping areas as well. So it's been accepted by the county as non-compostable.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Darren Schumate, question?
No questions.
Rob Fisher?
Yeah, one question for the county. You had mentioned an alternate solution to the structural issue. Was that as simple as running sleepers in the other direction of the joist?
If they were to put down, say the decking is 2x6 decking for the epay. If they were to put down 2x6 FRT and then put the epay directly on top of that, it would just mirror the same,
Okay.
wood members. That was my point.
I see what you're saying, but it would have to align with the 2x6 decking above it. So your concern is that this epay catches on fire and people standing on it. I mean, that it then no longer serves to support the people standing on it. Is that right?
Yeah, it's regulated as a platform, so it's an elevated walking surface. I put the section that governs platforms in my supporting
Right.
document for the code. And so in small areas, you can use fire retardant treated wood because it does have a certain level of fire endurance based on testing. The epay only has the testing related to flame spread, which is only for finished materials, not structural materials. And it has no additional endurance testing done on that. So you would need the FRT to actually provide the structural capacity, and you could use the epay on top for the finish.
Okay.
And just having it mirror it would allow you to keep the gaps, because they mentioned the concern about having the openings for drainage. So to accomplish that, you could just mirror the pieces together.
Right. Right. Okay. Thank you.
Amato, any questions for Mr. Grill or his team?
Okay, so what I've heard is the issue that the county has with the installation is that the epay is considered structural because it spans between sleepers, and so for that span, that area of span is the structural component of the epay. Is that?
Well, the epay it actually rests on fire retardant treated beams.
Correct.
Which are not sleepers. They're elevated on, some kind of post or something.
If I looking at the detail, it looks to me like they're sitting on, maybe wrong. Are they elevated or are they?
If you see the little screws to the left-hand side and the right-hand side,
All right, so
those are like, like raised flooring type
okay.
posts, I'm guessing. And they're adjustable, so you can level it out.
Yeah, I could clarify as I help draw the detail. It's they're little, like Simpson seats that they sit on when you run a beam off from footing to footing, and they're 3 feet on center. So the span of the sleepers are completely minimal, and it's an effort just to allow water and drainage to flow below it.
Right.
Yeah, and just to clarify, sleepers are continuously supported, so they don't experience bending. These are not continuously supported; they're only supported at the end, so they do have a bending force on them or stress on them, and so they're beams. Just a minor terminology detail.
Okay, so because of that definition, you're defining them as beams, therefore they're classified as structural. Is that where the logic goes?
Yeah, but our concern is not with the beams because they are FRT. Our concern is with the decking, which is also acting as a beam because it's acting as its own structural support because it's only supported every, I guess, 3 feet on center or whatever the 16 inches on center, the spacing for the FRT beams. So it's the structural deck as well as the finished floor material.
Okay.
You okay, Amato?
No, I want to go back to
Okay.
either Jared or Ray.
Yeah, let's keep it to Ray's team at this point because the county still has to make their opening, their detailed comments.
Okay. Has the conversation that Wilhelm raised regarding mirroring the EPA, was that discussed with you, and is that something you felt wasn't appropriate for this detail?
Well, we have had numerous discussions, and actually the last discussion on the structural was actually an FRT plywood, which would not accommodate drainage.
Correct.
So that was, the idea of putting strips. I'm not sure how feasible that is. I'd have to defer to Jared on that from an actual constructability perspective.
Yeah, again, I echo Ray. I think that's newer information for us as far as, and Dan, please correct me if I misunderstood, is basically cutting strips of fire retardant plywood and basically laminating them to the underside of the EPay, the exact size of the EPay, running the same direction as the EPay. I think that's what the suggestion was, and assuming that it sounds feasible, I don't understand how that improves the situation. Plywood strips are less structurally sufficient than EPay, and we have verified all of these members and sizes with a licensed structural engineer on the project, engineer of record. So I know that spanning plywood is less structurally sufficient than EPay, and also considering it's fully filled below it, so the fill isn't the primary structural support, but it does provide structural support. So in our eyes, there is no structural concern here at all, and that's been verified by a structural engineer.
Okay, thank you.
Wayne, any questions for Mr. Grill or his team?
Yeah, I have a number of questions and discussions. I think what the county was stating is not plywood under there, but essentially you build an FRT deck. So you build it with 2x6s sitting on the joists, and then you laminate the top of that with the EPay to get the appearance that you want. So you essentially, the joints would align and you would end up with an FRT, an entire deck that's FRT. I guess as I look at this, I mean, I have one concern is that you're using FRT lumber, but you're also in a situation where you're exterior and you've got a pressure treated issue as well. And my experience has been you have a hard time getting a material that can both be pressure treated for an exterior use and FRT treated at the same time to function. So I think that's something on your side you need to look at and make sure that material even works in this situation, because I don't think it does. The other suggestion or the other thought is to make that non-combustible fill effectively your support for the deck, and do something along those lines so that the members that you have that are the joists are actually truly sleepers that are sitting on that material. And then you put the EPay on the top and it's all supported by the non-combustible fill material, much like you would do in an old warehouse where you have sleepers and a cinder fill or something in between. But as I look at this, I don't see how you can get by the code fact that these are structural members that are spanning between the joists, and yes, they're only spanning 16 inches, and yes, it's EPay, but it's not fire retardant. There's not really a question in any of that. I just my comments.
Okay, I don't have any questions, so I'm going to turn the floor over to Dan and the county staff. Dan?
Okay, Dan Wilhelm, Deputy Building Official, Fairfax County. Yeah, this would be allowed as a finished material throughout the building, but it would not be allowed as a platform throughout the building. I think they made a statement that they could use it, everywhere. You're only allowed to do a platform of this size, for 3,000 square feet, up to 30 inches high with FRT. So even if it were all FRT, you would still be limited in where you could use this. The fact that the floor assembly is concrete, steel, and 2R rated, we're not really looking at the assembly of the main structural floor. We're looking at this as a platform, which is already on top of the floor. So the comments regarding whether this is, the structural frame and the steel and the concrete aren't really applicable to our review for this. Yeah, and so that the glass, as far as it being the structural component, we would be concerned about how you would keep your flooring level if you relied on the glass, which is basically a gravel type situation, and how you would maintain levelness of the floor if you relied on it for the structural. And with that, if you have any questions.
Okay. George, do you have any questions of the county?
Yeah, for Dan. If, as I understand the code, if you install IPE on sleepers, it's okay, right? I think you have to fire block the sleepers, but it's okay, right?
As long as it complied with the section for the concealed spaces, you could do that, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So instead, they're putting IPE on joists, which are a little bit higher than sleepers. And that's not okay. But in order to satisfy the county's concern, they've agreed to put foam glass in between the joists. It would seem to me that fire retardant treated joists and the foam glass is a much better deal under IPE than just sleepers with air. Is it not?
The sleepers would be continuously supported and they wouldn't be elevated up off the deck the way you see this here.
So that's the issue, continuously supported rather than every 16 inches.
Because this is an elevated platform.
Yeah, I know they did put the foam glass in there to try to satisfy the requirement, to satisfy the county that what they have is going to be just as safe as what they would do with sleepers. And you're saying it doesn't, basically.
It doesn't meet the intent of the section for, that I gave you for platform construction, which is what we're evaluating this as.
It doesn't meet the code, or it doesn't meet the intent of the code, which is basically let's protect people from fire.
Well, it doesn't meet the code. And furthermore, it doesn't even meet the intent of the code under a code modification. So yes and yes.
Yes to both of them.
Well, that's why they apply for a code mod, because it doesn't meet the code. So that's already been established. And then we evaluated it, based on their alternative, whether we thought it met the intent of the code, which was the code modification.
Okay, but I didn't see anywhere in the books that indicated joists with foam glass in between them. That's not in there, right?
I don't think foam glass is in the code at all.
Okay, so they did something different to try to meet the intent of the code, and that's not acceptable at this point, right? That's
the opinion of the committee is as we stated in our position statement.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Darren, questions of the county?
No.
Rob Fisher?
No, sir, I'm good.
Okay, Amato?
I just want to make sure that I heard correctly from the county, is that if they mirror the epay with 2 by whatever the width of the epay is, spanning the 16 inches, that would be acceptable to the county.
It would appear to meet the requirements, yes.
All right. So, okay, that was all.
Wayne, questions?
No questions.
Okay, I have none. Okay, Ray, you and your team, would you like to make any final comments or, if you will, rebuttal?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple things really quick. I mean, we definitely feel that this approach that we've proposed meets the intent of the code, or we want to brought it to the board. You know, as a practicing fire protection engineer for over 40 years, and you know, I've investigated a lot of fires, major life loss fires. I've been involved in the 9/11. I had 3 contracts with NIST inspecting and evaluating 9/11 event in those buildings. So I mean, you know, I don't bring anything to the board lightly. The issue of FRT versus you know, this epay performance, or the performance of the epay, as Jared said, you know, structurally it's better than an FRT piece of lumber from a structural support standpoint. And you know, the mitigation of the non-combustible fill throughout that area definitely is intended and will meet the intent of the code from the standpoint of the ability of fire to develop or spread below that deck. And you know, lastly, there is no exposure to this. You know, a Class B, I'm sure you know, the board is probably familiar with the ASTM E84 test. That's the same test that's used for flame spread, as well as for determining fire retardant treated lumber classification. And the difference is that instead of a 10-minute exposure, which is the basic test, the test is extended for an additional 20 minutes for a 30-minute exposure for FRT. So it's mainly a flame spread and ignitability test. It's not a structure, it's not an endurance test as you would find in an ASTM E119 test. So, you know, it is still a flame spread type of a test. Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate the board's indulgence.
Sure. Dan, any rebuttal or final comments?
Apologize. Could I add in a few?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Thank you,
Jared.
So as the signing professional on this just incredible project, I take that responsibility very serious. And the crux of the issue is there a safety risk for people on this terrace? And we've gone back and provided something that we feel, in my professional opinion, is above code requirement, goes beyond meeting the intent of the code. I respectfully disagree with Mr. Wilhelm about the intent of the code. I think we've gone above and beyond the code with filling all of the void space in between. We've gotten structural engineers to stand behind the spans that are presented here and have no doubt that by signing this, I am personally taking responsibility on behalf of Gensler, making sure there is no life safety risk for this particular condition on this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan, final comments or rebuttal?
Dan, Dan, you're on mute.
Sorry, I must have double clicked or something. Dan Wilhelm, Deputy Building Official, Fairfax County. As far as it being a better structural material or not, we're not really disputing the structural characteristics of epay. It's really just the whether the code allows it in comparison to fire retardant treated wood, which was the basis of our analysis. It may be stronger. I'm sure it withstands the spans, or they wouldn't have specified it. And it sounds like a really great material. We're not disputing that. We're just trying to match it up to the intent of the code. And as far as whether or not the flame spread test is a full endurance test or not, the additional testing for the flame spread does indicate that it does resist, to a greater degree, flame spread than what the normal testing is. The EPA meets a flame spread of 75, and you have to be at least 20 or no more than 25 to be fire retardant treated wood. And then you have to do several things above and beyond that, which is, you have to do for the test additional 20 minutes, and the flame shall not progress more than 10.5 feet beyond the center line of the burners at any time during the test. So it's a much more rigorous test. In my opinion, it does indicate a greater degree of endurance, even if it's not the full 119 endurance test.
Okay, thank you. So George, do you have questions for either party?
Yeah, just Dan, I'm sorry to keep pounding on you about this, but I just so I can get my head around what the real issue here is. If they had poured concrete between the joists instead of glass foam, would it have met the code? Would it have met the intent of the code? Because the code doesn't actually have any of this in it.
Are you saying the EPA would rest on the poured in place concrete?
Well, I'd probably see the top of the joist too. They'd look like sleepers, wouldn't they? I'm just trying to get my head around why the glass isn't good enough. So
yeah, I guess I can see why you're trying to see how the concealed spaces section might apply to this.
Right.
But in our opinion, this is really closer to a platform. It doesn't closely resembles a platform construction rather than sleepers, sleeper condition. As long as the floor is held in place by non-combustible material or FRT and it can remain level with that support, I think they would meet the intent of the code. So if you poured the concrete in place and it matched the wood underneath it and continuously supported it, then basically you have sleepers, or you have just a floor material on concrete.
So basically, it's an issue of concrete versus glass foam. I mean, when you get right down to it.
Right. So would the flooring remain level with glass? So it's like, if you poured in gravel.
Yeah. Right.
If you use gravel, could you just lay wood down on top of it and expect everything to be good?
Would gravel make the code, intent of the code?
If it was gravel and the flooring was meant to float on the gravel, yes.
Okay. All right.
But the question is the floor surface has to remain a level surface because there are occupants on it. So you can't have an undulating surface while people are walking on it. So they do similar stuff like this. They'll do sand or very fine gravel, and they'll put concrete pavers on it, just like you would in your patio in your backyard, and that's okay. This is not what that is.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Darren, questions for either party?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Rob?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Amato?
Yeah, I have a question for the AE side. Is this EPA here? Is this the only place that this EPA is existing in this project design?
That's correct.
Okay. You could have designed this using having pavers on pedestals, and it would have avoided this whole discussion if you change design ethos.
Well, the county doesn't allow the typical pedestals because they're plastic.
Point of order. That's new information.
Yes, go ahead.
We do allow pedestals if they're non-combustible.
Who's speaking?
This is Dan Wilhelm,
Okay, sorry, Dan.
Fairfax County.
Yep.
Okay. All right, that's all. And yes, it's new information. I'm sorry. But I'm trying to understand.
Well, and it's a good question, Amato. It's a design decision, a decision that the owner really stands behind was using a warmer material than pavers on pedestals. And Dan is correct. There is only one manufacturer that we know of that makes non-combustible paver pedestals that are acceptable in Fairfax County. So it becomes a sole source price issue for it's a new we've done pavers on pedestals for 30 years now, and it's a new issue that plastic is no longer acceptable in the county. So the manufacturers haven't caught up to that yet.
Understood. Okay.
Another point of order, if I may, just to clarify, we've seen at least 2 manufacturers come through our review process. So it's not sole source.
Okay.
Can I ask David Conover a question?
Go ahead, George.
We're not here to redesign the building. We're here to rule on the appeal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, George, thank you. But I was just trying to understand how we got here for this appeal. That's where my line of questioning was, just trying to understand how we arrived at this design and this solution. Okay, so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Wayne, do you have any questions?
I do not.
Okay. Well, that closes the public hearing phase of this, and now the board will decide. I'm going to frame at least what I see as the issue, and then we'll get a motion in a second and discuss. So there are 2 issues with this. One, in terms of compliance with an application of section 410.4 of the USBC. One is structural and one deals with fire. Apparently the county and what's been proposed is structurally okay, but there's a disagreement between the appellant and the appellee as to whether or not what's proposed is equivalent or meets the intent of the code with respect to fire retardant treated wood or fire resistance. So I think that is the main point of this. If either parties disagrees, certainly I'll ask both of you if that seems to, both Dan and Ray, does that seem to summarize the issue? And then I'll get a motion from the board.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is Ray Grill. That sounds consistent to me, yes, sir.
Dan, does that sound consistent?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So would anybody on the board care to make a motion with respect to approving, accepting the appeal, or denying the appeal?
This is Wayne Bryan. I will make a motion to deny the appeal.
Okay. Is there a second?
This is Amato. I'll second it.
Okay, so is there, Wayne, a reason or some discussion?
I think it comes down to it doesn't meet the code, and don't feel like we should be trying to make the determination of the equivalency of EPA decking versus a fire retardant treated wood decking, and unless they can show some testing or something that shows that it has that equivalency or that it is approved by the code, I don't see how we can approve this.
Okay. Is there, thank you. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Yeah, I have just something among us members, the board members here. I know it does not meet the code, but I don't think the code actually has this configuration in it. They've done something different. And I think I think that what they've done does meet the intent of the code, and that is basically safety in case of fire.
Yeah, I guess I'm not necessarily, this is Wayne Bryan again. I'm not
Yep.
necessarily sure it's our job to determine that equivalency. I think that becomes somewhat of a slippery slope if you're saying that this doesn't meet the code, but it's pretty good. I think that's a problem.
I'm saying it doesn't meet the code because the code doesn't address this particular technique, and it is this board's responsibility to determine if it meets the intent of the code, because often things that come to this board don't fit quite into that big blue book we have. That's what we're here for.
Wow.
Okay, I'm done.
Okay, George, this is Dave. I have a question. I mean, in the board assessing intent or equivalency with the intent of the code, I guess at the end of the day, we need some data, or don't we need some data or information, something to rely on to kind of make that judgment?
Yes, we do. I think they've supplied it all.
Okay,
I
okay.
mean, I'm not an expert on foam glass, but I understand glass doesn't burn, and I looked at the data that they provided, and it apparently doesn't compress.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yes. I'm off
Any
now.
okay. Any other comments? I guess I haven't heard from Rob or Darren. Comments on the motion or discussion?
Yeah, so maybe some general, it sounds like at one point, I think Wayne, you threw out an idea of putting the so-called beams directly as sleepers on the glass. And it sounded like that was an achievable solution. I mean, does that satisfy the county's question or not? I mean, because
Well, it would be a different design than the one that they have submitted,
Right.
in my estimation. Would it be a design that could pass the requirements of the county? Yeah, I think so, because then it becomes more of a sleeper situation with the deck boards directly on the material below, and whether that's whatever that fill material is. I mean, somebody had said concrete, but certainly concrete works, but would gravel work? Sure. Would this glass material work as the support for that and have a true sleeper material? Sure, that's possible as well, but that's not the design that's been submitted.
well, and I guess
I would like, if I can, I'd like to just remind the board, our job is not to design or redesign. We have code requirements that the county is applying and has interpreted. And our job, I think at this point, is to determine or make an assessment of whether what has been proposed by the appellant and not accepted by the county is, in our opinion, meets the intent of the code or meets the code or not.
so I guess to make sure I understand this correctly, the concern is that there will be a fire and that the e-pay will fail because it burns. Is that a fair paraphrasing of the issue?
That's a fair paraphrasing of the issue.
And if it fails, somebody who's standing on it while it's burning is going to fall 3 inches?
Correct.
Okay.
Which is how far they'd fall if it were on sleepers, right? Or 1.5 or 2 inches.
Right.
And is in the detail, is the space between the so-called beams, is it also filled with glass?
If I
Yes.
can answer that, yes.
So the actual e-pay is like a fraction of an inch, or does it actually rest right on the glass? I mean, is it
Well, we assume it's resting right on the glass.
okay?
So that glass supports that e-pay in the event of a fire in between the joists.
Yeah, but it's not designed that way.
That's not the design that was submitted.
Right. I mean, from my point of view, is based on the discussion, I've heard several solutions other than what's been presented that could be acceptable. So,
That actually is what was submitted.
No,
And it calls for non-combustible fill.
Yeah, but that's not how that's not what this design is. This design is something different than
What?
that it's setting on that fill.
I guess, okay, so this is the question to Wayne. Uh, if the structural engineer shows calculations that he or she considered the fact that the EPA also I mean, it's being supported by the beams, but it is also supported by the glass fill, would that be then satisfactory?
If that was if they submitted a design that was truly would be in my opinion would be a sleeper design as opposed to a joist deck design, then it would meet the intent of the code. It would meet the code. It wouldn't even meet the intent of the code. It would meet the code, but that's not what's been submitted. And I think that's my point. I mean, Darren, you're right. Does it make a lot of sense that you're only going to fall 3 inches? No, but does it meet the code? No, it doesn't.
It gets down to whether it meets the code or whether it meets the intent of the code. Because again, Wayne, I couldn't find anything in the book that showed this configuration.
No, I mean, again, you're interpreting things all the time to what the code says. The code says that if I have a structural member spanning between joists in a type 1 or type 2 building, it has to be non-combustible. And what that means, it has to be FRT. It doesn't say, or you could use EPA, or you can do something else. It says it has to be FRT. And this is not.
I would argue that they've taken measures to address the safety issue, the fire safety issue, and the code doesn't have this. If the glass foam wasn't in there, this would be an open and shut case, but they did put it in.
But what is it? It's a fill. It's not structural. It's not supporting the decking. I think that's the point.
Yeah, it's supporting it between the joists. Yeah.
well, it's not.
In a fire.
It's not supporting it, at least not the way this design has been presented.
Right.
Yeah, okay, I thought we agreed that in a fire it would drop an inch, 2 inch, whatever, but you wouldn't drop 9 inches.
Yeah, but that's yes, that's correct, but that's not the point.
This is a fire safety issue, right? It's not a.
It's a code issue. It starts with a code issue.
You're effectively, I think, George, the issue that I have is you're effectively changing the code. You're saying that
Right.
you need to have FRT wood unless I put some stuff below it, and then I don't have to. And I think that's where it's the slippery slope that I'm not sure we should be going down.
No, I understand your concern. I don't think it's our job to change the code. I do think it's our job to see if somebody has done something to address the intent, and that's
and you just, again, as when I look at it from a practical matter, I can certainly see if this was, say, a deck above a space and people could still be in the space while it's burning. But in this case, in order for that EPA to burn, and from what somebody shared the test with, I think Dan mentioned the test with the burner and spreading 10 feet in so many minutes or seconds or whatever, that I can't imagine that somebody's on that deck while there's a fire that's intense enough and hot enough to burn through the EPA. And that, I mean, and again, that really does not have anything to do with whether it's code compliant or not, but just from a practical standpoint, I can't imagine somebody who would fall 2 inches wouldn't have already been out of the out and away from the building by the time it gets that intense.
Yeah, Darren, you could apply that logic to a whole bunch of different things in a building. If you want to carry that to its slippery slope, I can walk you through issues in buildings that code says you have to do something, and the actual practicality of it is almost 1 in a million, but it's still in the code. And if it's in the code,
yeah, I think you got to be careful when you start trying to apply too much logic to the code.
Well, yeah, and this is
electrical engineer to an architectural structural discussion. So
this is Dave. As I'm listening to the discussion and what I've heard, and I'm reading 410.4, in the code, I'm thinking, I can see an exception coming into the code during the next, open cycle. In other words, you have a prescriptive, what really is a prescriptive set of requirements, and then either because of advancements in materials or new ideas for design, and all of a sudden it's like, I'm trying to do this, but this old prescriptive requirement didn't envision that. Oh, we need to either rewrite the code or write an exception. And I guess I generally don't try and weigh in on motions, but I think our job is to look at the code and what it currently requires, right or wrong, and make a determination whether what's been proposed meets the letter of the code or meets the intent of the code.
Mr.
So
Chairman,
David, I would argue that several of our meetings have been all about things in the code that are eventually going to make the code change because it didn't keep up with the new materials.
Yeah.
And I would include glass foam at this point. But I'm not arguing with Wayne about whether this is compliant or not. It's just the intent.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I don't know if I'm allowed to speak. I wanted to offer something that I thought would help.
And is this Jared?
Yes, sorry, Jared Krieger with.
What I'm going to do, Jared, is if I'm going to open this back up, which I think is fine, I'm going to also provide the county an opportunity to provide any comments after you've made your remarks.
Sure, and fair enough. And I would actually appreciate Mr. Wilhelm to actually comment to see if he agrees with this. The red shaded area, the non-combustible fill, part of the original back and forth was that the cavity needed to be filled solid, not leaving space for the e-pay to, potentially drop 1 or 2 inches. So that red shade was intended to be packed tight to the underside of the e-pay. And that note in the top left could be amended to say non-combustible fill, fully filled cavities to underside of e-pay. And, if it helps, we could get the structural engineer to provide some specific feedback or go on record to say that the fill does act as a structural support in addition to the joists.
Dan, do you have any comment?
The only thing, Stan Wilhelm, Fairfax County Deputy Building Official. The only thing that I would be curious as to, when you walk on gravel, it compresses, your foot sinks a little bit. How do you keep the gravel in place and the boards don't, deform? I know glass bead itself individually is non-compressible. When you put them all together, the larger the aggregate size, it tends to move around a little bit. So we would look to see how that would be addressed. If this is going to be used as a structural material, how does the structure below this stay in place? Because that's important to know.
Okay, I think everybody's spoken on the board. Certainly, I don't want to cut off any discussion, but we have a motion and a second to deny the appeal because it doesn't meet the code, and we shouldn't be assessing at this point, if IPay is greater than or equal to fire retardant treated wood, without any equivalency testing or something of that nature. So the motion is to deny the appeal. Are we ready for a vote? Any further discussion? Okay. George, your vote on the motion to deny?
No.
Darren?
I agree with
Darren?
George. No. Oh, can you hear me?
No? Okay, yeah. Okay. Rob Fisher?
No. Let's just clear what we're saying here. No, we are not denying the appeal.
Well, the motion is to deny the appeal. If that motion fails, then I'll have to ask for a substitute motion. So George voted no on a motion to deny. Darren voted no. Rob voted no. Amato?
Yes.
Yes. Wayne?
Yes.
Okay, and chairman is not voting. So the vote on the motion to deny was 2-3. Chairman not voting. The motion failed. Now I need a substitute motion.
Well, I guess the motion now is to uphold the appeal. This was George Page.
Okay. Is there a second?
This is Rob. I'll second
Okay.
that.
Rob seconded it. Any discussion on this motion, which is the 180 degrees different than the one we discussed the last 10 minutes? Any discussion? Okay, the motion is to uphold the appeal. George?
I vote yes.
Darren?
I vote yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Amato?
No.
Wayne?
No.
No, okay. That motion, and chairman not voting, so that motion to uphold the appeal is approved with a vote of 3-2, 0 abstentions, and chairman not voting. Okay, that concludes our business for today. Thank you to the board members and to Ray and Jared, as well as the county staff, for your time and attention, and we're adjourned. Thank you very much and have a great day.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
everyone.
So long.